All right. Our speakers today are going to be firstly, Jonathan Gross, who will be followed by Igor Chigrin. John is Pemico's managing director. He leads Pemico's clients through the entire digital transformation lifecycle, technology, architecture, planning, vendor selection, and a whole lot more he can do for you. And he has also acted as part-time MBA professor of systems analysis and design at the Schulich School of Business at York University. And without further ado, I will hand over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Colin. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us after your lunch hour. I'm going to take control and share my monitor with you. And we've got some really good content for you today. And we're hoping that at the end of today's presentation, you're going to have a really good understanding of what it takes to build a strategically aligned technology transformation plan, but take it one step further and then figure out from that plan how to build your project roadmaps, how to pick the right systems, and some best practices to implement them. We're going to walk through everything from business process design and architecture to technology architecture to building your teams and budgets in order to execute that. Igor is going to then take it from me and talk about grant funding and other funding options to help you support it. Before I get into the meat of today's presentation, I'll tell you a little bit about our firm. From a practice area perspective, we're full service in the technology digital transformation space. So we do these technology assessments that really come out with these strategically aligned plans. I'll walk through the details of that. We help clients go to market and evaluate vendors and make the right decisions on both the software or the technology and then the services side. We have a contract negotiations practice. Unlike most of our team that come from engineering and systems and technology backgrounds, I'm a lawyer and I run this practice area. So we help clients negotiate technology deals and service deals from small to large. We help clients get ready for big transformative implementations or perhaps small ones, and we'll talk about what that means in a little bit. We project manage implementations and we help clients continuously improve. Our firm has been in business for 42 years. In 2021, it will be 43 years. We're 15 employees, and we've helped clients evaluate, implement, and optimize more than 140 different technology solutions. When we're called upon to implement major transformations, like an ERP implementation, well, we've done a lot of them over our 43-year history, and we've done it with 100% success rate. And so we hear about failures and we hear about issues on these things. There are certain ways to do these things right. What's part of what we're going to talk about today is how you can set yourself and your organization up to deliver successfully. So who do we do this for? We do this for high growth startups, companies like Boston Dynamics in Massachusetts, Lucid Motors in California, Semios Biotechnologies out in Vancouver, as well as large enterprises and anything in between. So we work with a lot of mid-sized companies, a lot of small and mid-sized companies in Canada. What separates us in the marketplace is that we help our clients become mature organizations and develop these cultures of continuous improvement so that you can continue to develop and optimize your business over time so that you're not always beholden to consultants. We're full service in that we do the advisory side, helping you develop these transformation roadmaps, pick the right vendors, but we also do implementation management. That's enough about us, and I'm going to jump right into it. Let's talk a little bit about the trends and where things are going from a product-oriented company's perspective, manufacturing and distribution. McKinsey did a study, and this is now dated. This is 4 years ago. I can't believe how old this study is. It feels like this came out just yesterday. But even back then in 2016, they went out and surveyed manufacturing executives from manufacturing companies, and 70% of the respondents said that they expected new competitors from totally different industries to use Industry 4.0 to enter their market. So Industry 4.0 is really this concept of your connected operations in your enterprise systems, leveraging things like artificial intelligence and automated robotics to help you make better informed decisions, to perhaps monetize your data, to perhaps develop new service models and so forth. That same pool of respondents said that 90% said that they believe that Industry 4.0 could improve their competitiveness. And that's, I think, pretty understandable. If we're becoming more efficient, if we are passing off very structured decision-making opportunities to systems and robotics, well, it frees human capital up to do the things that people are really good at, and that's analyzing and making decisions off of data. Same thing. I mean, close to 90% said that they believe that Industry 4.0 would improve their operational effectiveness. The real interesting statistic, and I don't think the needle has moved much in the last 4 years since the study came out, is that only 16% of manufacturers have an Industry 4.0 strategy in place. So in other words, only 16% said that I really have a vision of how I'm going to take my enterprise systems, things like ERP or equipment maintenance systems or CRM or quality management systems, and then tie them into my operational control systems, things that control my warehouses or my conveyors or my shop floor equipment, whatever the case may be. And so anecdotally, we kind of see this in the marketplace too. I think what we're seeing is that a lot of the companies are trying to put the foundational technology, the foundational processes, the foundational data structures in place to support this type of Industry 4.0 initiative in the future, but many haven't yet turned their minds to what that means practically. So the point here is there's a real opportunity for you folks on the call to take a step back and say, you know, how can I embed technology into my business strategy to deliver meaningful improvements that are going to move the needle on our competitive positioning, on our profitability, whatever the case may be. Part of what we do as a consulting firm is we help our clients benchmark themselves against their peers, against other industries, whatever the case may be. And without, you know, it's not surprising. Companies that are coming off of 20-year-old legacy systems, or even something like a QuickBooks and a spreadsheet, paper-based work order processes, whatever the case may be, tend to realize significant benefits when we can implement integrated cross-functional business processes that are supported by technologies. And I've left some statistics here on what our clients see when they go from what are typically manual and intensive business processes to leaning on processes that are driven by systems. And so you see the ROI numbers, the internal rates of return, the payback. In some cases, the payback is very long. I mean, if these are big, disruptive projects, they're big, expensive projects, it's going to take a while to see the return. But again, we're thinking long-term here, not short-term. And again, there is perhaps an opportunity or a competitiveness cost to not making these changes, particularly if your competitors are starting to perform better. And that's really where I want to start the narrative. What I want to do is now walk through 5 critical success factors to delivering a successful digital transformation. And it really is all hinged on setting yourselves up with a good plan. I'm going to start my discussion talking about KPIs and strategic alignment. Oh boy, there are a lot of shiny technologies out in the marketplace. A lot of things that offer promise, but are they going to deliver meaningful value to you? And that's what you really need to be able to take a step back and do, and that's focus on strategy driving technology improvements. And so I'll give you an example. And I just want to stop before the example for 1 second and talk about how technology doesn't deliver business benefits. It's how you use it to enable your business to make improvements. So I'm going to give you an example of a client of ours that came to us running 20-year-old legacy systems. But even before it put those systems in, what it did is it basically replaced another legacy system, but didn't, you know, re-architect its data, re-engineer its business processes. So they came to us and said, well, we're a furniture manufacturer and we're a mid-sized company, and we compete against the likes of Herman Millers and Steelcases. And what we're seeing is that we're significantly lagging. As a mid-sized firm, we have to do better than those big companies on customer service, on order fulfillment times. When we benchmarked our client against its bigger competitors, it took our client 7 weeks to turn around an order from the time that they received the order from the customer to the time it was shipped and installed. Their competitors were doing it on 3 weeks. This is not a recipe for a successful long-term business model. So when we went in there looking at, well, how are we going to drive this strategic target to become a top quartile fulfillment organization? Well, we looked at the business processes and the data, and really what came out, and I'm not going to get into the details, you'll be able to review this when Colin makes this presentation available, is that they were design engineering every single order that came in the door, and it was overburdening their engineering department. They'd approve the designs after a certain amount of time on the engineering side, release it to the shop floor. Oftentimes there would be change requests that would have to go back from manufacturing up to engineering, and that created a huge amount of friction in the process. Well, we took a step back and said, well, hold on. We can shave a few minutes off of your processes and make them run, but that's not going to move the needle sufficiently from a strategic perspective. So we advised our clients to restructure their organizations, how to move from an engineer to order model to a configure to order model, where most of the orders, our target was something like 70 or 80% of the orders should come in without getting touched by the engineering department, without getting touched, period, until they hit the planning engine for MRP and scheduling. And that was the goal. We had to re-architect the data. We had to set up new departments or functions in the organization in order to support this. My key point here is that we need to start at the strategic drivers, understand what the opportunities are and what the gaps are, and then work to fill those, again, laser focused on our business objectives. So how do we do that? Well, we start at the top of the company, and I suggest to you, take a look at your strategy and how you're doing, your key targets and how you're doing, and then drill down. Start going systematically through your organization and start looking at business processes. Understand two things when you look at business processes. One, what is a critical requirement? What separates us in the market from our major competitors? Things that we had better protect, and no matter what we do in the future, we better augment, we better improve, but we certainly had better not move away from it. These are our critical, idiosyncratic, competitively differentiating processes or data or reporting requirements, whatever they may be. That's one category. Second thing we should be looking for is waste in the business process. What are things that we're doing that aren't adding value to the process? It could be waste as in excessive scrap on work orders. It could be waste in terms of I am double handling data. I'm taking it from one system, putting it into a spreadsheet, and then putting it into another system. Understand the waste. There are ways to categorize the waste. It's beyond the scope of this call to talk about it. But we need to look head to toe through the organization as to how we're doing things from a process perspective, how the data is structured against which the process is run, how the organization is structured because processes flow through organizational structures, and then ultimately the technologies and the tools that enable or hinder business processing. Once we've looked at the as-is processes, now we start building the future state. What does that look like? We start at the corporate and organizational structure. At the corporate structure, if you're multi-site, if you're multi-company, multiple warehouses, multiple production facilities, how do they interrelate? Are they vertically integrated? Are they fulfillment centers? How do we wrap our arms around our entire supply chain? And it's important to understand how things are done and what decisions we make that may create friction in the business process later if we don't architect things correctly. So for example, if I have two companies, but my system only supports one database per company, does that mean I have to clone my customers, clone my items, somehow synchronize that data and then manually process intercompany transactions? Well, that's inefficient. So we need to think about the best way to architect it and the best systems to support it. Functional design. Do you have the right departments doing the right things? For example, if we may not do MRP today, but if we do MRP tomorrow, do we have a planning function? Do we deal with customer projects where I need some type of project management function to follow the life of the project from quote all the way to manufacturing and then installation? Well, if not, well, you'd better think of building it, and so on and so forth. Your information and the data architecture. How is the data architected in order to support transactional requirements and reporting requirements? Are your bombs and your routers set up properly? Customers, do we have all of the relevant addresses? Whatever the case may be, again, defining your master data requirements, in terms of what we need the system to support and what our business needs to support it, but how we're going to control it. And that's called data governance. You know, is customer accounting data open to the entire company to change things like credit terms or whatever the case may be? Well, no, maybe we want to have some security around that to make sure that we're protecting and governing the data to make sure that it's adequately controlled. Best practice business processing. So we have looked at the organizational structure. We've looked at the data architecture. We've looked at the functional design of your organization. So you know, the roles that are required to deliver it. Now we're in a position to take a step back and say, how do we want to set up our business processes in the future? What's the best practice that we can apply? What are those critical idiosyncratic requirements that we looked at earlier that are our competitive differentiators? How do we fold those in to make sure that we're protecting it? And so again, going through this exercise and defining the future state and then mapping the benefits that that future state's going to deliver is very important, because ultimately what we then do is we take this collection of, let's call it your business blueprint that covers your organizational structure, it covers your data, it covers your processes, and then we can now say, well, what technologies do we need in order to enable this future state? And then we can start building out our integrated applications architecture. Certain things might come out of the box natively in an ERP system. Certain things may need to get tied together through interfaces in order to flow the data. It's important to paint the picture of how this application framework looks, and then ultimately drill it down in terms of, you know, what are the platforming requirements in order to tie things together and deliver workflows and documents and data warehousing, and then how are we going to set it up from an infrastructural perspective? Do we want to go and house our own servers, or do we want to put it in the cloud and make it someone else's responsibility? But piecing together the IT framework in order to deliver the business requirements that we've defined that are tied to the business strategy is how we build that integrated strategic plan. Now, this is not the lowest level of detail that I'm going to suggest you get to. I'm going to suggest when you want to do this properly, you bring it down a level. We've got these great maps that tell us what we want, when we want it, and how it gets implemented, and what the processes look like. But there's another level of detail that I'm going to suggest to you is very, very important. I'm going to suggest that we start cataloging our business requirements. So we may have a process step, for example, that says receive a purchase order. But, you know, your process map is probably not going to have a level of detail that says, well, I've got to receive it as a serialized item, or when or all of the various other data elements that are against it, or other maybe process steps that are too low level of a detail to put on that process map. Well, we want to capture that in rows and columns. We want to do that for a few different reasons. Beyond just evaluating the vendors, it's going to drive the scope for what we need to implement and when. So when we talk business requirements here, and I'm going to slow down because this is really, really important stuff. We want to catalog them properly. The way we do this, and this is a template or an approach that you can take, is we break it down by function or department. Production, materials management, finance and accounting, supply chain, sales, quality. Go up and down your organizational structure and list your functional areas or your departments. The area within the department is another grouping. That could be a business process like receiving, work order processing. It could also be a data record like item master or my item vendor cross-reference file. There's the requirement itself, and that's the description of what's needed. And the requirement could be the ability to receive a pallet of goods, and on that pallet receipt to be able to automatically populate all of the serialized items on the pallet. That could be a business requirement. We take that requirement of receiving, that specific requirement that's in the receiving category, that's in the warehousing department, and then we prioritize it. Is it a must-have? So we better do this thing. Whether I do it in the system or manual, let's decide that later, but we better have it. It's preferable to have it in the system, or it's nice to have. It would add some benefit, perhaps not meaningful strategic benefit. And if we have extra time or money in our budgets, maybe we'll get to it. The timing of the requirement. Is this something immediate, like we should be doing it today? Does it wait for phase 1 implementation, phase 2, and so forth? Is it foundational? Foundational in our language is something that is should be done as precedential to something else. So for example, we need to implement warehouse management in phase 1, but we don't have a warehouse manager position. Or our aisles, rows, racks, and bins aren't labeled. So maybe we have a foundational or precedential requirement that says label our warehousing locations. It could also relate to something that will deliver immediate benefit. So if we have to spend X number of months selecting a system, then X number of months implementing it, is there low-hanging fruit that could deliver immediate value? I want to see my sales report, but I want to have geography on the report. Well, maybe that's a phase 0 foundational requirement that we don't have to wait for a new system in order to deliver. Then we have this thing called key for selection. Key for selection is our showstopper. So remember when we were talking about those critical, competitively differentiating requirements? This is where we tag them. This is how we make sure that we are delivering them. So a must-have, you'll recall a few minutes ago, we got to do it, but we might have a workaround. We're not working around the keys for selection. If a vendor doesn't support a key for selection, they haven't paid the price of admission into our evaluation process. These are the showstoppers. The last tag is best practice. And so what a best practice indicates, it indicates that we're going to change the way we do something. We're going to adopt a process or a data structure that's been proven over thousands and thousands of times to deliver benefits in scenarios that are analogous to ours. And so I'll talk about why we catalog things this way in a minute, but I do want to show you what an extract looks like from a requirements matrix. So here what you're looking at is you're looking at the planning and scheduling department. You see the areas, production scheduling, MPS master scheduling, MRP, among other things, the description of the requirement itself, and the various tags, the priority, the timing, the foundational, the key for selection, and the best practice. So this is a really low level of detail. This gets really interesting when we run analytics over the top of this thing, because we can slice and dice this and use it in so many different ways. We can use it to develop our requirement sets to evaluate the vendors. We can use it to identify the impact on our organization and implementation. I see that I've got 43 engineering requirements to implement in phase 1. I'd better think how we're going to support that from a people perspective while we continue to do our design engineering function for orders that are coming in. So maybe I'd better backfill that person. I see that I've got 25 best practices for customer service. That's going to imply we're going to make some changes to the way we process our service organization requirements. Maybe I'd better start training our customer service team on the future state so that when we bring the vendors in to showcase their wares, or when we re-implement our system or upgrade our system, our customer service folks know what the future looks like, and we're not going to just reinvent the old, perhaps gap-filled processes we used to have. And so once we've got a sense of these requirements and how they break down, the next step is to say, well, how are we going to implement these things? Again, we're talking about a transformation. We're not talking about, a small incremental process improvement. So a big transformation that goes to the heart of the company, I'm going to suggest to you, is a high intensity, high impact project that calls for high performance teams. High performance teams that can execute, that have a specific organizational structure for reporting and decision making, and that is made up of the I need to come up with a better term, but that is made up of the best and the brightest in your organization. Needs to be a self-contained team with different layers, a steering committee to make decisions, project management to do project control, and solutions architecture to manage the core team to report up into the steering committee, and then the core team that is going to be hopefully made up of your subject matter experts with support from perhaps consultants who know the software, who know the best practices. The best practice approach is for the organization that's implementing to take ownership over the deliverables, to take ownership and accountability over what's getting put in, because those consultants are going to roll off your job and onto another one, and they don't have to live with it. And they haven't been in your company as long as your people have. They don't know the processes as intimately. They are not entering in sales orders every single day. Your people know it best. The consultants should be advisors. They should push you to make improvement decisions that drive improvement. But I will suggest that the best practice is for you and your teams and your people to take ownership over this. And this is a lesson we've learned over our 43-year history, our more than 700 major successful implementations, and our track record that outperforms the market by a significant margin. It's very hard for small businesses to dedicate the people that are required to make this happen. If you can't do that, if you don't have the capacity to pull out people who are instrumental in delivering your business day in and day out, then you may need to pay consultants to do some of the lifting. You will need to bring your people in at key points to do the testing, preferably to train the end users. There are ways to do it in different fashions. There are risks associated with it. But again, it's important to understand the roles, to define them, and to the extent you have to assume certain risks, understand how you're going to mitigate the impacts. When you build your project plans, when you take your requirements that say, here are my phase 1 requirements, phase 2, I find it very useful to break it down into functional kind of heat map Gantt charts that say, this gives me an indication. Dark green means there are a lot of requirements. Light green means there are fewer requirements. But now I'm starting to get this kind of graphical executive level view that, oh, a lot of supply chain requirements here. I better think about backfilling or upping the number of consulting hours I'm going to pay a consultant to help support this process. And this really helps to kind of contextualize what we're doing over what periods of time. Once we have this, once we have an idea of, the types of systems we require, the integration architecture, the teams, the changes we're going to make, we could start building our budgets and our total costs of ownership and ROI analysis. Now, one of the things that's important, especially if you're a small and mid-sized business, is that the vendors know that you have limited budgets, and they're going to come in and underbid the project in the hopes of winning it, and you may overrun later. Your job is to develop a realistic budget and a realistic total cost of ownership. And so understand what it takes to do these things properly. There's no, magic. You may have vendors come in and say, it's going to take you 400 or 300 consulting hours to do it. Plug in the floppy disk and it's pretty much Bob's your uncle. That's not the way these things work. It's, there are a lot of really good vendors and ISVs out there. There's some who are going to try to just kind of, get a quick win in a sale. Just do your diligence. And when you're building up your budgets and your total costs of ownership, think of all of the other costs that are beyond buying software, buying services, or handheld scanners. Do I have to backfill people? Do I have other things I need to do, like upgrade perhaps Microsoft Office, put in wireless networking in my warehouse, buy label printers, whatever the case may be. But understand the full budgetary implications before you embark on it. Build your list of vendors. Understand who is playing in your space and who is not playing in your space. Understand what their strengths and their weaknesses are, not just, hey, can the software process a sales order the way I do it, but what's their support structure look like? What does their implementation methodology look like? Are they going to be around for 10 years? Are they a viable going concern? What's their cloud architecture look like? How do they protect my data? What's the user experience of the system? There are multiple dimensions. At Hemico, we have termed 8 dimensions of vendor fit that categorize various requirements to evaluate in these 8 buckets. The vendor viability, the software development roadmap, functionality, technology, total cost of ownership, user experience, supportability, and implementation methodology. do a multifaceted due diligence on a balanced scorecard type of approach, so that you know that you're, you know, developing a business partnership with someone who is going to support you for the long term across whatever you need support on. Now, just to wrap up, I'm going to summarize. I covered a lot of ground in a pretty short amount of time. But what you've learned, or I hope you have learned, is how to build an integrated digital transformation assessment and roadmap to align your projects and your requirements relative to critical strategy drivers, to analyze your current state, identify gaps, and also identify your critical idiosyncratic needs, to architect your future state, not just process-wise, not just data-wise, but organizational-wise, technologically as well. Define and catalog that low level of business requirement. Build strong, high-performance teams. Build your plans. Build realistic, comprehensive budgets and cash flow analyses. And so when you do this, it's not just to go to market and buy an ERP system. If you want to optimize your current installations, if you want to bolt on an MES system or a CRM system, again, the same philosophies, the same models apply. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Here's my contact information, but I'm going to pass it over to Igor to really get into the meat of the funding opportunities that are available to help you support yourselves on this initiative. Thank you all.
Well, fantastic. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for the great presentation. We'll be now more focused on the funding side of it, and I'm going to present you a couple of good programs, government funding programs that help you to potentially implement ERP systems. Just a couple of words, first of all, about who we are. So we've been in the government funding business since 2013, accumulated many great success stories, and are responsible for delivering millions of dollars to our clients. And we employ top writers to maximize the chances of approval of your application. A couple of notable cases of our clients: we secured $3 million for an aerospace manufacturer in Vaughan, Ontario. 300,000 for a metal fabrication shop in Kitchener to expand the plant. But this is not the limit. This is Heist Limit. For example, this particular company, Merit Functional Foods in Winnipeg, they received about close to 100 million in a combination of different government subsidies, grants, loans, and so forth. Unfortunately, not our client, but the reason I'm interrupting is just for you to understand what kind of funding is available out there. So let's now focus more about our subject. Before you go ahead and implement ERP system, you actually have to understand what system is right for you, just like Jonathan told us in the previous part of the webinar. So the good news is that for this purpose, there is currently a program called CME Technology Assessment. This program is available for manufacturers located in Southern Ontario and those small, medium-sized employers that have between 15 and 500 employees. What you can do with this funding is you can work with the technology expert, such as Pinnacle, to recommend a particular solution, technology solution that will be right for your operations, for your size of the business, and for your business goals. Because you don't know what you don't know. No, there are lots of different solutions out there. You know, Industry 4.0 is a buzzword, but what's in it for you specifically? It's a big question. And this particular program is designed to help you answer that question. Money-wise, you can get 100% of the cost of such assessment, up to a maximum of $25,000. So for now, there is only funding for assessment. There's no funding through this CME program for implementation, but we very much look forward to it. There's no a timeline for that program to be launched, but we'll keep an eye on CME Canadian manufacturers and exporters because we are sure that sooner or later they will launch a program that will actually pay a portion of the implementation cost. However, what's available at this time, there are government funding programs for skills training. It's not a secret that ERP implementation takes a lot of time for the employees to get trained in how to properly use it. There's also quite a lot of process optimization training, new processes, modified processes training. So all of those processes may qualify for the government funding. The program that's right here on the screen is Canada Job Grant. It's the federal and provincial program, and in every province, it's a bit unique. Canada, in Ontario, for example, it's called Canada Ontario Job Grant. In Alberta, it's Canada Alberta Job Grant, and so forth. There are some minimal differentiators between from province to province, but overall, the program can provide the cost of third-party training between 50% and 100%, and the maximum amounts could be between 10,000 and 15,000 per trainee. So that's what you can achieve. Now, there are some nuances about the applicability of this program in Ontario for software training, but I don't suggest we spend time right here on this webinar on figuring out the details. By the way, just to remind you that Canada Job Grant is a program that's available coast to coast. Ontario has another additional program that also may be used for ERP type of trainings. The additional funding is provided by Yves Landry Foundation, and it's available for Southern Ontario-based manufacturers that employ over 10 employees. Now, at this time, the intake is somewhat close. However, the foundation accepts preliminary applications. Those preliminary applications, you should consider them as the expression of your interest. Once you've applied, once you've submitted your preliminary application, you secure your place in the line. When the foundation gets additional funding, you'll be contacted and you will have a chance to submit the full proposal and get the reimbursement. The reimbursement is 25 to 50% of the project cost, up to $100,000. And eligible costs include not only the third-party training fees, but also all the internal training, all the labor hours for all time that your employees spent on training, which may be very significant. This is your somewhat hidden cost that vendors may not necessarily share with you. They will share what they will charge, but it's kind of hard to predict how much, what kind of costs, what kind of expenses you will have in the salaries of your employees. So, which is why having a reputable consulting firm on your side is very important, so that you understand what are your overall expenses. Now, let's talk now about the government funding for software and hardware components. One of the initiatives that I wanted to highlight is Canadian Agricultural Partnership Program. Don't get confused with the name of the program. It's not just for agricultural producers like farmers. It's also for food and beverage manufacturers that will definitely, many of them definitely have need in ERP systems. In terms of the expenses, this particular program pays for hardware and software expenses, consulting expenses, all the customization, as well as the training and labor cost that's involved in the implementation project. Money-wise, 35% of the project cost up to $100,000. And the intake dates vary from province to province. You'll have to consult the website of the Canadian Agricultural Partnership Program in your province, and you'll have the application intake dates there. Another initiative, again, going back to Ontario, for automotive industry, here is the Ontario Automotive Modernization Program. A very good and successful program, very niche, and that means that the likelihood of receiving money is a bit higher than average because you are only competing against other automotive parts manufacturers. You're not competing with the folks from other industries. Similar cost structure as the agricultural program, 50% of the funding, 50% of the cost up to a maximum of 100,000 is what you can get. Right now the intake is closed, but we expect the new intake in spring, so stay tuned. It's the provincial program, so Ontario government always announces the upcoming intakes. If you are in Quebec, good news for you, anywhere called SME in Action or PME en Action in French. The purpose of this program is to help local manufacturing technology companies implement ERP systems. Specifically for ERP systems, they allocate 40% of the project expenses up to a maximum of $50,000. If you are in Prince Edward Island and a small to medium-sized enterprise, you have a special government funding program, IT implementation assistance, to help you implement, well, pretty much any kind of hardware and software that results in improvement of your operations. The local government in PEI allocates 40% of the project cost, up to $40,000 for that purpose. And again, it's only for PEI. If your business is in Newfoundland and Labrador, a similar program, local program to help companies implement software and hardware solutions, covers also consulting and labor expenses and all the training expenses. You can get 75% of the project expenses up to 100,000 and have your ERP system or other advanced software implemented. Now, we were focused earlier on only those programs that one way or the other pay for software, hardware, or training. However, these are not. This is not the entire universe of the programs, government programs for businesses. There are lots of them. I'll give you just a couple of examples. There are government grants for equipment purchasing, improving productivity, hiring new employees, developing your export sales, research and development is probably the largest, the largest category of government funding by the amount of dollars allocated for research and development. And my personal favorite type of purposes of funding is business expansion. There are certain regional funds that are available for technology companies, food companies, manufacturing companies to expand, and they pay for partially pay for construction, partially pay for purchasing equipment. And good news is that your ERP projects may be actually included in one of those expansion funding applications. So don't consider ERP as a standalone project. It may well be that it's a part of your overall expansion. So that's just a tip for you before we conclude. Quickly about the application process. For the application process, you will need the proposal or quote from the ERP vendor or consultant. Then you collect other information that's relevant to the particular application form and submit this application along with the proposal or quote from the vendor, ERP vendor or consultant. It's important to remember that when it comes to government grants, you have to wait for approval before you can either spend money on the project or start the project without paying the vendor. So be patient. It takes time to go through the government funding process, but eventually it will pay off. If you have any questions, here's my contact information, and also because you participated in the webinar, you'll get it by email. I strongly encourage you to fill out a free eligibility check form on our website. The link is also here and will be sent to you. When you just have to input very basic information about your company and your goals, and then we'll be reviewing these submissions, and we can at least recommend you what particular programs are available for you. So highly encourage you to do that. Strongly encourage you to do that. And that concludes my part of the presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and let's see if we have any questions. It's time to ask them. There's chat and there's Q&A, so whatever you prefer.
Okay.
Use to ask the questions.
As people think about their questions, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Igor. It has been a very educational experience this afternoon, and we now certainly look forward to hearing from our audience. We'll be very keen to have your questions. All right. All right. Q&A. All right, just give me a moment, please. Let me just make sure. I'm gonna unmute everyone so you can unmute your mics and jump in on the conversation yourselves. All right, so everyone, your mics are, you can unmute yourselves and go ahead and ask questions. If you can't do that, just send me a quick note in the chat and I can see what I can get going there for you. Okay, there is a question. Oh, you're welcome, Gada. Thank you very much. There is a question in the chat. Jonathan, is directed at you. Jonathan, can you discuss rough costs and timelines for these transformations? Also, what would the average revenue of your clients be? Thank you. And that is coming from Matt Anderson.
Hi, Matt. Nice to meet you. Thanks for the questions. I'll try to be brief. I mean, the timelines and the costs really depend on what you're looking to achieve and how complex the implementation is. So I'm happy to have a conversation after the fact to get a little bit more information, but the assessment process can take, for a small company, 3 to 5 weeks. For larger companies, they can certainly take much longer. Evaluating vendors can take, 2.5, 3 months at the quick end, and they can take much longer at the long end. Implementation is obviously the biggest wild card. Those are big, major projects that require redoing the way you do your business, and it takes a lot of time to set up and to test and to train people on and to migrate the data and so forth. So again, I'm certainly happy to take this conversation offline and make it a little bit more specific to what you're looking for. From our client perspective, to answer the second part of your question, the average revenue of our clients, we work with companies that are pre-revenue all the way to multi-billion-dollar organizations. So it's certainly all over the map. If I compare and contrast our Canadian client base to our US client base, on average, our Canadian clients tend to be smaller, single-site operations in many cases, small, stable businesses, small, high-growth businesses, mid-sized businesses. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. And from Elliot Godden for you, Igor, his question, he's saying, it was mentioned about government grants that we need approval before spending the money. Mm-hmm. That is quite correct. Mm-hmm. And his question is, can you please confirm again the process with the Ease Landry Foundation applications?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So Ease Landry Foundation has 2 steps in the application process. First one is preliminary application, and the second one is what they call main application. Now, the preliminary application can be filled out at any time. You don't have to, you don't have to wait for the funding to be available in that program. You can do it right away, as long as you've done it before your ERP project started. You're good to go. However, you'll have to wait until your main application is approved to be able to start your ERP training, actually. So you can start ERP project implementation, or you can purchase the system, but you'll still have to wait for the approval from Yves Landry Foundation before you can start the training. And you just, I don't know your situation, that you have to manage your time. Maybe you can do it. Maybe you can split the project and buy the system first. Maybe even implement it, and then you train everyone else when the money is available. But it's up to you. But the point is that you can submit the preliminary application at any time, but you'll still have to wait for the approval of your main application before you can start. And your follow-up question, are they approving applications even though funding isn't available currently? They are not approving main applications, but they are reviewing preliminary applications, because they cannot make a decision based on just a preliminary application. And you're welcome, Elliot.
Okay. All right, well, we are coming up on the hour now, and we don't want to keep anyone waiting for too long. So I'm going to open the floor to one last question. Does anyone have another question? All right. All right. With that, I'm only going to ask Igor to just quickly comment. We had been discussing prior to everyone joining the idea of what will be happening with the CME funding. Do you think there will be any follow-on funding from the technology assessments?
Yeah, that's our best hope. However, like we cannot guarantee it's going to happen, and unfortunately, we cannot guarantee that it will ever happen. So no, let's hope for our best. The need is there. The fact that many Canadian companies lack proper systems is evident, and there's no question about that. So let's hope that the government will find money for that program, among other issues that they have currently.
Okay, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, let me first say thank you to our guests for coming, and then say thank you to Jonathan Gross, Managing Director of Pemico Consulting, and Igor Chigrin, Principal of Fair Grant Writing. It has been a wonderful afternoon. I will get the recording all set up so that it can be available to everyone in short order. Thank you all. Have a wonderful good afternoon.
Thank you.